So, as you are beginning to see and looking at Act 1 and Act 2, Hamlet is feeling increasingly alienated in his own society. As he is left alone to mourn the loss of his father, he increasingly feels like the society that he is in does not accommodate his new understanding of truth. And certainly by the end of Act 1, when Hamlet is told the truth of Denmark and he alone knows that Claudius has played foully for the crown, Hamlet feels even more at odds with not just the immediate domestic situation that he's in, but also with the state of Denmark as a whole. So we're learning a few things about Hamlet as a character. We've looked at his first soliloquy, seen how he thinks, and we're beginning to explore some of the ways that he approaches newness in his life. My contention is that Hamlet as a character is going to challenge some of our pre-existing notions of what a hero is. Hamlet is not he's not a superhero. He's not an Avenger. The stakes of this play are not earth-shattering. There's no alien invasion or meteorite about to destroy the earth. And Hamlet's heroism is not even the kind of like Macbethian heroism that we saw breaking necks, cash and checks. Instead, Hamlet's a thinker. And my contention is going to be that his heroism is in modeling for us a kind of courageous and adventurous thinking that many of us decide not to engage in. Hamlet is remarkably self-reflective. At times, we'll explore how this is unhealthy for him, but his willingness to sort through all of these things and to try to be intellectually honest in a discovery of what he's being asked to do, I will argue, is the centerpiece of his heroism. So as we explore how he interacts with his world, we're going to have to talk about thinking. In particular, we're going to have to talk about metacognition, which is thinking about thinking. If you could kind of like zoom out of your own brain and then watch how you think. That's what metacognition is interested in. So cognition, of course, just means things connected to the brain. Meta means beyond something. So metaphysical is beyond the physical. Metacognition is sort of like above and beyond thinking. So as we see this with Hamlet, we'll see that already he's kind of showing us some thinking about thinking, the ways in which he's exploring his own thought. In Act 1, after seeing the ghost, he says, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." A lot of earlier the two folios, two different kind of like screenplays for this play that Shakespeare wrote. One used the word "are" instead of "your," which many scholars still preference. Hamlet saying, "How do you respond to new information that shakes your understanding of the world? Prior to seeing the ghost, it's likely Hamlet wouldn't have believed in ghosts. Hamlet is going to school in Wittenberg, a predominantly Protestant school. He's told that his father is in purgatory. His father from purgatory says, 'I'm confined by day to fasten fires, and at night he's allowed to come out and haunt people.' There's no orthodox position that says, the afterlife runs from 9 to 5, but afterwards you're kind of on your own. Make sure you report back to work at 9 a.m. Like, that's not how anyone in Hamlet's day would have perceived the afterlife. And so Hamlet now is being forced to accommodate into his pre-existing worldview something that previously there was no room for. He didn't believe these things were a possibility. And so how do we respond? We talked about this a little bit last module. Do we respond with anger, denial, rejection, as many of us do when there's new information that challenges a deeply held belief? We ignore it, we trivialize it, we rationalize it. Hamlet instead seems to respond with humility, a kind of healthy doubt that says, I'm willing to question some of these base assumptions that will then push him into a kind of exploration that we'll see as the play continues. In Act 2, talking to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, Hamlet says, I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself a king of infinite space were it not that I had bad dreams. All right, so this is taking me back to like middle school science. So I'm a little shaky on this. But I recall when we talked about like electrons and stuff, that the conversation was if you could shrink down and be in an atom, you would say that the distance between electrons in this electron field was like the distance of a football field. If you could be proportionate to an atom, there's a lot of space in there. And that's kind of what Hamlet's saying. He's like, I could be bounded in a nutshell. I could be microscopically shrunk down to the size of an atom. And in that space, I could count myself the king. I could say, I'm the king of all this space, and look how much space there is. Proportionately, there's all this space for me to be king of. Were it not that I had bad dreams. Were it not, Hamlet says that there's a suggestion of something beyond what I'm seeing. My perception, Hamlet seems to be suggesting in this kind of bizarre quote, is limited. I know that there's more going on than I see. Right now, I am speaking to you in a microphone in my classroom. I'm the only one in my classroom. I could close the doors and I could pretend in the four walls of this classroom that I am the king, and I could stay in this space forever and never leave it and live a life that is limited to what I see and what I experience. Hamlet says there's more going on outside the classroom. If Hamlet is applying that more largely to the entire world, you could say, like, we think we know stuff, but there is stuff out there that we don't know. And that stuff, that's the stuff that we can't perceive, those are the things that are going to shake up what we think we know about things. Are there things outside of our consciousness? What do we do with those things? What do we do with those bad dreams, those inklings, those like fragments that suggest to us that the neatly controlled little thing we think we have is fictional? It's not what we think it is. Hamlet suggests that there's things going on beyond himself. There's things going on beyond his perception, and that creates cognitive dissonance for him. In the module that we looked at last week, we said cognitive dissonance is when two things are contradictory or new information makes us question a previously held belief. It's uncomfortable. In the example we looked at last week, we talked about smoking in 2019. Knowing it's bad for you, maybe the smoker wakes up one morning with a heavy cough, and he's got this real moment where he says, I know what I'm doing is wrong, what is bad for me, it's killing me, and yet he continues to smoke. Why? Does he just trivialize that behavior, rationalize that behavior? Many of us do that, all right? But Hamlet is now stuck in kind of two sorts of dissonance. One is a sort of situational dissonance in this kind of Russian nesting doll, or just nesting doll, I suppose, vision of his setting. At the core, he's got a personal tragedy that is destabilizing him in the death of his father. That expands out into a domestic setting that is uncomfortable. His mother having married his uncle in Act 2, he'll refer to them as uncle, father, aunt, mother, which is bizarre and complicated and messy, and he knows that. It's messy enough without the added knowledge that Claudius has murdered his father. That of course makes it even messier. And this of course then echoes into a national upheaval in which the entire nation of Denmark is celebrating a reigning king who is despicable, who has murdered his brother in order to become king. And Hamlet's kind of at the epicenter of all these things that are destabilizing. Add to that this psychological dissonance, this understanding that his belief about the world is being challenged in some important ways. It makes sense why Hamlet has decided to act kind of crazy. He says, I'm going to act with an antic disposition to make sense of what's happening here. If you are living in an insane society and you act sane, how is society going to treat you? An insane society views sanity as insanity. It views insanity as sanity. And in this paradoxical backwards thing where black is white and white is black and 2 + 2 = circle, Hamlet says, I got to act in a way that's going to be bizarre to make sense of bizarre times. It's going to be some bizarre activity happening here. All right, so a couple quick summaries then in way of review of where we were before. Hamlet here is recognizing the limits of his own perception. He's recognizing that there are things about the world that he doesn't understand, and this is producing a humble willingness to question his own thinking. He doesn't deny these things, and we'll see by the end of Act 2, he perhaps is more willing to question things than he even should. He is very open-minded now. Destabilizingly so. I don't think destabilizingly is a word, but I'm alone in a room, so I can say any words I want. I'm a king of infinite space. His humble willingness to question his own thinking is a hallmark of his heroism here in quick review of our first act.